There comes a moment in every person's life when you have to stop and ask yourself a very serious question. Who am I when nobody is validating me? That question is deeper than it sounds, because many people have built their entire identity around the opinions of other people. They know who they are when they are being praised. They know who they are when they are being accepted. They know who they are when somebody needs them, compliments them, chooses them, or tells them they are important. But take that validation away, and suddenly they don't know themselves anymore. That is a dangerous place to live, because if other people become the source of your value, then other people also become the source of your insecurity. Whoever can praise you can control you. Whoever can reject you can destabilize you. Whoever can withhold attention can make you question yourself. And that is why valuing yourself is not simply a matter of feeling good about yourself. It is a matter of establishing an internal foundation that cannot be easily shaken by external circumstances. You have to understand the difference between value and validation. Validation comes from outside. Value exists within. Validation says, they approve of me, therefore I am worthy. Value says, I know who I am, therefore their approval is appreciated, but it is not required for my identity. That distinction can transform your entire life. When you don't know your value, you will constantly audition for acceptance. You will walk into relationships trying to prove that you are lovable. You will walk into workplaces trying to prove that you are intelligent enough. You will enter friendships trying to prove that you are useful enough. You will constantly perform because you are afraid that if you stop performing, people will discover that you are not enough. But what if you stop performing? What if you stop trying to convince everybody? What if you realized that your responsibility is not to make everyone recognize your value? Your responsibility is to recognize it yourself and then live according to it. That changes the way you relate to people. You don't become desperate for attention because you understand that attention is not the same thing as love. You don't confuse being needed with being valued. You don't confuse someone's temporary interest with genuine commitment. And you certainly don't confuse someone's rejection with a declaration about your worth. People reject things for many reasons. Sometimes they reject what they don't understand. Sometimes they reject what challenges them. Sometimes they reject something simply because it does not fit their preferences, their capacity, or their season. So why would you allow another person's inability to recognize something in you to become your definition of yourself? Think about a valuable object sitting in a room where nobody understands its worth. Does the object become less valuable because nobody recognizes it? No. Its value existed before the recognition. And the same principle applies to you. There are gifts inside you that other people may never understand. There are dimensions of your potential that have not yet been revealed. There are things you are capable of becoming that even you cannot fully see today. Therefore, you cannot build your identity entirely on people's current perception of you. People only see a portion of your story. They see where you are. They don't always see where you are going. They see your present circumstances. They don't always see your potential. And sometimes the people around you have become so familiar with who you were that they cannot recognize who you are becoming. That is why you must learn to separate people's opinions from your identity. Listen to wisdom. Learn from correction. Remain humble enough to admit when you are wrong, but never surrender your entire identity to somebody else's opinion. There is a difference between being teachable and being controlled. A teachable person can hear criticism without being destroyed by it. A person who lacks self-value hears criticism and immediately thinks, maybe I am worthless. No, correction should improve you, not erase you. And rejection should redirect you, not define you. Sometimes the greatest freedom you will experience is realizing that you don't have to be chosen by everyone. You don't need every room to welcome you. You don't need every person to understand you. You don't need every relationship to continue. And you don't need to remain where your presence is constantly treated as an inconvenience. There is a profound psychological shift that happens when you stop begging to be valued. You begin making decisions from principle rather than desperation. You begin saying, this may hurt, but it is not healthy for me. You begin saying, I love this person, but I cannot continue participating in something that destroys my peace. You begin saying, I want this opportunity, but I will not destroy my character to obtain it. That is self-value. It is not selfishness. It is not arrogance. It is the discipline of treating your life as something meaningful. And once you begin doing that, your standards naturally rise. You become more careful about what you tolerate. You become more intentional about where you invest your time. You become more conscious of the voices you allow to shape your thinking. You stop asking, how can I get them to like me? And you begin asking, is this relationship consistent with the person I am becoming? That is a much more powerful question, because when you value yourself, you no longer measure success simply by how many people want access to you. You measure it by whether your life is aligned with your values, your purpose, your principles, and your potential. And that is where the next transformation begins, because once you know your worth, you will naturally begin changing your standards. You will no longer tolerate everything simply because you are afraid of losing someone. You will begin understanding that what you repeatedly permit eventually becomes part of the environment you live in. So remember this: you do not discover your value when someone finally chooses you. You discover your value when you stop believing that their choice was ever required to make you worthy. Once you recognize your value, something very important begins to happen. Your standards change. And this is where many people misunderstand self-worth. They think valuing yourself means looking in the mirror and saying, I am great. But genuine self-value is much deeper than positive words. Your real level of self-respect is revealed by what you repeatedly tolerate. You can say you love yourself, but your choices will tell the truth. If you continually accept disrespect, dishonesty, manipulation, humiliation, and relationships that consistently destroy your peace, then somewhere inside you have accepted the belief that this is what you deserve, or at least that you cannot live without it. And that belief must be challenged, because your standards are often a reflection of your internal picture of yourself. When you value something, you protect it. Think about something you consider precious. You don't leave it anywhere. You don't allow everybody to handle it carelessly. You don't expose it unnecessarily to environments that can destroy it. Why? Because you understand its value. So ask yourself, how carefully have you been handling your own life? How carefully do you choose the people who have access to your mind? How carefully do you choose the environments that shape your thinking? How carefully do you spend your time? How carefully do you protect your peace? How carefully do you guard your dreams? These questions matter because your life is being shaped every day by what you permit. You teach people how to interact with you through the boundaries you establish and maintain. If you continually accept behavior that violates your values, you communicate, intentionally or unintentionally, that access to you comes without responsibility. And this is why boundaries are not walls designed to keep everyone out. Boundaries are principles that determine how people are allowed to come in. There is a major difference. A healthy person doesn't need to become bitter to establish boundaries. You don't have to hate somebody because you decided they can no longer have unlimited access to you. You can forgive someone and still create distance. You can love someone and still say no. You can understand someone's struggles and still refuse to participate in their destructive behavior. You can wish someone well and still recognize that they are not healthy for your future. That is emotional maturity. Many people remain trapped because they believe that choosing themselves means rejecting everybody else. It doesn't. Choosing yourself means refusing to abandon yourself simply to maintain a relationship. And sometimes the hardest person to disappoint is not another person. It is the version of yourself that has become addicted to being accepted. You may have spent years trying to keep everybody happy. You became the dependable one, the available one, the forgiving one, the person who always understood. But there comes a point when constantly accommodating everyone else becomes a form of self-neglect. You cannot spend your entire life being emotionally available to people who are never emotionally responsible toward you. You cannot continually pour into relationships that only know how to take. You cannot keep calling something love when it repeatedly requires you to destroy your dignity. There is a philosophical principle here that we must understand. What you tolerate becomes part of the world you inhabit. If you tolerate chaos long enough, chaos begins to feel normal. If you tolerate disrespect long enough, respect begins to feel unfamiliar. If you tolerate being ignored long enough, you may begin believing that being ignored is all you deserve. And that is how unhealthy patterns become identities. The solution is not simply to demand that other people change. The first step is to change what you are willing to participate in. You cannot control everybody's behavior, but you can control your participation. You can say, I will not continue this conversation if I am being insulted. You can say, I will not sacrifice my principles just to remain accepted. You can say, I understand that you disagree with me, but you do not have permission to disrespect me. And sometimes you don't even need to announce it. Your changed behavior can speak for you. You simply stop returning. You stop explaining. You stop chasing. You stop begging. You stop negotiating with the same behavior that has already shown you what it is. This doesn't mean you become rigid or incapable of compromise. Mature people know how to compromise. But compromise should never require the destruction of your identity. There is a difference between flexibility and self-betrayal. Flexibility says we can find a solution. Self-betrayal says, I will become someone I am not so you won't leave. Never confuse the two. When you value yourself, you also become more disciplined with your time. You begin realizing that time is not merely something you spend. Time is your life being converted into experiences. Every hour you give to something is an hour you will never recover. So why give your best hours to distractions and your remaining energy to your purpose? Why spend more time maintaining relationships that exhaust you than developing the person you are becoming? Why continually study the lives of other people while neglecting the life you were given? Self-value creates intentionality. You begin asking better questions. Does this deserve my energy? Does this relationship produce growth? Does this environment support the person I am becoming? Does this decision move me toward purpose or away from it? Those questions create a different life. And eventually, you realize that standards are not about demanding perfection from others. They are about defining the principles by which you will live. You cannot require everybody to behave exactly as you want, but you can decide what you will participate in. You can decide what you will tolerate. You can decide what you will pursue. You can decide what you will walk away from. That is personal responsibility. And once you accept that responsibility, something powerful happens. Your life becomes less reactive. You stop allowing every person's mood to determine your mood. You stop allowing every rejection to determine your confidence. You stop allowing every invitation to determine your direction. You begin living by conviction instead of pressure. And that is when self-worth becomes visible, not in what you say about yourself, but in the standards by which you live. Because when you truly value yourself, you don't have to announce your worth. Your choices reveal it. And once your standards begin to change, something even more profound happens. The way you see your future begins to change because self-value does not only affect how you see yourself today, it affects what you believe is possible tomorrow. A person who does not recognize their value will often have difficulty recognizing their potential. They may look at their circumstances and assume those circumstances are permanent. They may look at their past and mistake it for a prophecy. They may look at their failures and conclude that they are incapable of succeeding. But your history is not the same thing as your destiny. What happened to you may have influenced you, but it does not have to define you. This is one of the most important psychological shifts you can make. Stop using your past as evidence against your future. You made mistakes. So what? You lost opportunities. So what? Someone disappointed you. So what? You experienced rejection. So what? You failed at something you genuinely wanted. So what? Failure is information. Rejection is information. Disappointment is information. None of these things have the authority to become your identity unless you give them that authority. When you begin valuing yourself, you stop asking, "What happened to me?" as though that is the final question. You begin asking, "What can I build from where I am now?" That is the language of possibility. And possibility requires vision. You cannot build a meaningful future if you have already decided that your best days are behind you. The future belongs to people who can see beyond their present circumstances. That does not mean ignoring reality. It means refusing to let reality become an excuse for permanent limitation. There is a difference between acknowledging where you are and accepting that where you are is all you can ever be. You may be struggling today, but struggle is not your identity. You may be starting over, but starting over is not failure. You may be behind where you expected to be, but being delayed does not mean being denied. Sometimes life takes you through a season you never planned because that season develops something inside you that comfort never could. And this is where self-value becomes connected to purpose. If you believe your life has no meaningful value, you will not invest seriously in your development. But when you understand that your life carries potential, you start reading, you start learning, you start asking better questions. You become more disciplined. You become more selective about what enters your mind. You stop wasting years trying to impress people and begin investing those years in becoming someone you respect. That is a powerful transformation, because your greatest responsibility is not to become someone else. It is to become the fullest version of who you were designed to be. Too many people live according to comparison. They look at somebody else's success and immediately conclude that they are failing. They see someone else's relationship and question their own. They see someone else's career and become ashamed of their progress. But comparison is intellectually dishonest because you are comparing your behind the scenes with someone else's visible results. You don't know their entire story. You don't know their sacrifices. You don't know their struggles. You don't know what they had to overcome. And most importantly, their assignment is not your assignment. You were not created to duplicate another person's life. You were created to develop your own. Once you understand that, you become less interested in competition and more interested in contribution. You stop asking, "How can I be better than them?" You start asking, "What can I become and what can I contribute?" That question produces purpose, and purpose changes the way you treat time. When you value your future, you stop wasting your present. You begin understanding that every decision is taking you somewhere. Every habit is building something. Every relationship is influencing something. Every hour is shaping something. Your future is not simply something that arrives one day. Your future is being constructed by the decisions you are making today. That means you cannot continually make decisions that contradict the future you say you want. You cannot demand a disciplined future while practicing an undisciplined present. You cannot ask for meaningful relationships while continually entertaining people who violate your values. You cannot ask for growth while refusing correction. You cannot ask for purpose while constantly surrendering your attention to distraction. Your future requires cooperation. And that cooperation begins with how you value yourself. If you believe you are worth developing, you will develop. If you believe your mind is worth protecting, you will become careful about what you consume. If you believe your future matters, if you will become intentional with your time. If you believe your purpose matters, you will stop allowing temporary discomfort to control permanent decisions. This is why self-value is not passive. It is not sitting around waiting to feel confident. Sometimes you must act before you feel confident. You must take the course, start the business, drop the book, learn the skill, fee for the opportunity. Have the difficult conversation. Walk away from the destructive environment. Begin again. You may not feel ready, but readiness is often developed through movement. You become stronger by doing difficult things, not by waiting until life becomes easy. And you must understand that the future version of you is depending on the present version of you to make different decisions. There's a person you can become who is more disciplined, more knowledgeable, more courageous, more peaceful, and more purposeful. But that person will not appear by accident. You have to build that person. You have to make choices that your future self will thank you for. And perhaps this is the deepest expression of self-value. Refusing to abandon your future because your present is difficult. Don't give up on yourself because progress is slow. Don't quit because nobody notices yet. Don't bury your potential because someone else failed to recognize it. Don't allow temporary circumstances to make permanent decisions for you. Keep developing, keep learning, keep moving, keep believing that there is more in you. Because the moment you begin valuing yourself, you stop treating your potential like an optional thing. You begin treating it like a responsibility. And once you understand that your future is worth building, your choices begin to change, your discipline becomes stronger, and your vision becomes clearer. You no longer live merely to survive today. You begin living intentionally for the person you are capable of becoming tomorrow. And when you begin to value yourself, when your standards have changed and your vision for the future has become clearer, there is one final transformation that begins to take place. You start choosing your life instead of simply reacting to it. This is where everything becomes practical, because self-worth is not proven by what you say in private. It is revealed by the decisions you make when life gives you difficult choices. You can say, I value myself, but the question is, what are you willing to do differently because you value yourself? That question separates inspiration from transformation. When you truly value yourself, you become intentional about your environment. You begin to understand that your surroundings are not neutral. The people you spend time with, the conversations you repeatedly engage in, the information you consume, and the habits you practice are all shaping the person you are becoming. You cannot continually live in an environment that contradicts your values and expect to remain unaffected. Environment has influence. Association has influence. Repetition has influence. And if you are not intentional, you can slowly become comfortable with things you once knew were unhealthy. That is why sometimes valuing yourself means changing your environment. It may mean spending less time with people who constantly pull you backward. It may mean becoming quiet when you used to participate in unnecessary arguments. It may mean leaving conversations that continually attack your confidence. It may mean refusing invitations that repeatedly lead you away from your priorities. It may mean creating distance from people you genuinely care about because you finally understand that caring about someone does not require you to follow them into destruction. That is difficult, but growth is often difficult because growth requires separation from what is familiar. You cannot become a new person while remaining completely committed to every old pattern. At some point, you have to choose. And one of the greatest signs that you are beginning to value yourself is that you stop making decisions simply to avoid discomfort. You begin making decisions according to principle. You ask, what is right? Not merely what is easy. You ask, what will produce growth? Not merely what will make me comfortable today. You ask, who am I becoming? Not merely, what will people think of me? Those questions create a completely different life because fear often keeps people reactive. They make decisions because they are afraid of being alone, afraid of rejection, afraid of criticism, afraid of failure, afraid of disappointing somebody. But when you value yourself, fear no longer gets to make every decision for you. You learn that temporary discomfort is sometimes the price of long-term freedom. You may have to disappoint someone in order to stop disappointing yourself. You may have to say no to an opportunity because it conflicts with your values. You may have to walk away from something you desperately wanted because you finally understand that wanting something does not automatically make it good for you. This is maturity. Maturity is learning that not everything you desire deserves access to your life. There are opportunities that look attractive but are destructive. There are relationships that feel exciting but are unhealthy. There are doors that open that you should not walk through. And there are doors that close that you should stop trying to reopen. When you value yourself, you become capable of discernment. You stop asking only, can I have it? You start asking, should I have it? That single question can save you years of pain because not every opportunity is your opportunity. Not every relationship is your relationship. Not every battle is your battle. And not every rejection is a tragedy. Sometimes rejection is protection. Sometimes delay is preparation. Sometimes separation is development. Sometimes losing something is exactly what creates room for something better. But you will never recognize that if you are obsessed with holding on to everything. Self-value teaches you that release is sometimes necessary. You cannot receive the future while your hands are permanently occupied by the past. There comes a time when you have to put down